Okay, so this is the second in the first tutorial of two tutorials. This one, we're just going to review real quick what we learned in the first one. This is the music staff, and we see the basic elements. Of course, we have the staff lines. There's 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we try to think there's 4 spaces here too. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. And we also have our clef here that clues us in. This little curly Q goes around the second line that reminds us that this is the G clef or treble clef. The next thing next to it is our time signature. Remember that the top number represents how many beats in each measure, in this case 4. And they're represented by quarter notes. That's what the bottom number says. They're represented by quarter notes. So this is a quarter note, and it has a note head and a stem, and there's different kinds of notes. For instance, you also have half notes. They take up 2 beats. We'll go back to our quarter notes. And we have our bar line, our measure line, and we have a final bar line, which is actually one skinny one, one fat one, right? That tells us that our piece has ended. We've come to an end. What else? I think that's about it. We also learned that that we have a way of remembering what our notes are. So we have E, G, B, D, F for the lines. And for the spaces, we have F, A, C, E. F, A, C, E. Doesn't look too much like an A. But we'll just have to stick with it. Alright, so those are the basics, right? And we learned 2 scales. We learned our major scale, which is made up of C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And we learned that we also start out with our minor scale. And it goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. So our minor scale sounds like this. And our major scale sounds like this. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about rests. Rests are just as important in music as the regular notes, because sometimes silence has a big effect. So this is a rest. So this is a quarter rest. Just like a quarter note, it takes up 1 beat. So that's our quarter rest. Of course, we have different kinds of rests, just like we have different kinds of notes or metronomic values for the rests as well as the notes. So we can make this into a half rest. So make it. Come on, Meester. There we are. Our half rest. So as this music plays along, we play C, D, and then for 2 beats, we won't play anything, and then continue on. Let's hear what that sounds like. Whoops. Go to the back to the beginning. So we said, well, if we said 4 for free, 1, 2, 3, 4, C, D, rest, rest, G, A, B, C. I think my pitch was a little off there, but C, D, G, A, B, C. So we talk about quarter rests. We also can have what we call a whole rest. So we can have a whole rest. And we see, oops, that's not a whole rest. That's a half rest again. So here's our whole rest. Oops. Doesn't want to change for me. Turn this off. Just like that. There we go. So this is a whole rest. And we notice the difference between the whole rest is it hangs from a line, whereas a half rest rests on the line. And I try to remember it by saying that, okay, so the whole rest, he can take on 4 beats, so he can do pull-ups, right? And the half rest can only do 2 pull-ups, so he has to sit on the bench. He's got to sit out of the game. That's kind of how I remember it. So this guy can do pull-ups, this guy can't, right? Because he can do 4, he can only do 2. So 4 beats, 2 beats. So we can mix things up. I can say, okay, I've got a quarter note here, and a rest, and a quarter note, and a quarter note, and let's see how that sounds. So it's D, D, A, B, C. So, little strange melody. So you see that our ears tend to want to make things that sound good. Let's see this one. I think I'm going to go make this go back to F. So you see here that F, A, C, F. That makes a little bit more of a pleasant. So we see that this idea of what we call tonality, that's what we talk about in music. We talk about tonality. We think of the distance between the notes as kind of giving gravity. They want to, what we call, resolve to where they started from. So there's gajillions of melodies that start off on a note. They go up and they kind of meander around, but they want to fall back to the home note, or what we call the root of their tonality. In this case, it would be the note F, because of this distance between C and F is what we call a perfect fifth, and it gives that gravity. This interval is the distance between 2 notes. It gives it kind of like, sometimes I also think of it like, valences on an electron, right? Valences of an atom. the atom wants to the electrons around the atom, they want to rest around certain shells, right? Well, it's kind of the same thing with the notes. They don't want to stop here, right? And like quantum mechanics, they don't want to just stop in the middle. There's only certain places they can go, so they want to go all the way over here. They don't want to go somewhere here in the middle because it's just not satisfied there, right? Kind of the way to think about it. But so that's the idea in music. We talk about tonality. We talk about consonants. Consonants is when two notes sound good together, and dissonance when they kind of sound off kilter, like these two notes, F and B. If we follow those two one after the other, they're going to sound the most dissonant together. And we'll just listen to that. Yeah, there it is. So that's called our tritone. That's one of the most dissonant sounding notes, or intervals rather. It's called a tritone. And we'll get into that maybe in another video, but I want to cover other things in this one. Just the basics. We have quarter notes, quarter rests, half rests. There's another thing I want to get into. So two more things about rhythm that I want to cover in this one. So one of those is that we can divide the beat. In music, we often divide the beat. That is to say, we divide the time that occurs in one beat. Not fair, you say, right? So this is what I was talking about flags. So here is what we call an eighth note. It is an eighth note because we can fit 8 of them. If I fill them all, if I fill all the beats with eighth notes, we'll see that 8 of them fit into one measure of 4/4 time. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and so that's what we like to say. We like to vocalize the way that we're going to follow the beat. We like to vocalize it. So we say 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And we also talk about in a certain way, we talk about this being the downbeat and this being the upbeat. So down, up. And we move our foot down. So I'm moving my foot down when I'm playing this note, and I move my foot up when I'm playing this note. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. One of the first ways we learn to divide time in music was through eighth notes. So eighth notes make our music a little bit more dynamic and interesting, especially when we do something like this. So go back to my, oops, gotta get out of here. Okay, so especially if we have something like this, I'm gonna delete this guy, goodbye, and get rid of this guy. So now we have something interesting here. We've got 1 and now, if I look right here, on the downbeat of the second beat, I'm not going to play anything, but then I'm going to have to play something on the upbeat of beat 2, and then go play. And now I have to be careful not to play for the entirety of beat 3, because on the last half of beat 3, I'm not going to be able to play. And I'll slow the tempo down so we can hear that better. Then I'm going to go back and hit play. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. So that, again, we especially with what we call syncopated rhythm. Syncopated rhythm is just that. Is when we have a rhythm, melody, or note that begins on the up beat. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. So in that case, I just clapped. I snapped my fingers. Or you can clap. So the idea is in practicing rhythm, sometimes, I'll go back and I'll say, sometimes in music, what we want to do is practice what I call, I don't know how that got there. Interesting. What I call modalities. Modalities. Because there's all sorts of skills that we have to do when we're reading music. One of them is keeping track of the pitches, right? Pitches. That's one skill, right? And sometimes what you should do to practice reading your pitches is just make a bunch of flashcards, draw 5 lines, and then put random pitches there, just draw random pitches on them, and practice reading your notes. Remembering our EGBDF FACE sequence, right? Just practice reading the pitches on the notes. And another modality is just reading the rhythms, as we call it. These are rhythms against the beat, because the beat is always there. So that's the idea. Some people interchange beat with rhythm, right? With rhythm, when they're actually two different things. The beat is always there, even when we're not playing music, right? The rhythm is how the notes sound against the beat. So that's a more strict way of thinking of it. But, in popular music, we think, oh, that's a great beat. Well, what you really mean, that's a great rhythm, right? So there's two different things, two different modalities, right? So just recognizing the notes and recognizing the beats, two different modalities. Another modality is just practicing technique, and we're not going to get into that because I'm not showing you how to play piano, right? That's another modality, the actual physical playing, a technique of the way you strike keys or how you make sound, or how you breathe when you're singing. So it's what we call technique. Actually, how you play your instrument. And your voice is an instrument too, so how you breathe, how you enunciate your words when you're singing and stuff. So sometimes we concentrate on one instead of another. That's interesting. Just kind of appeared there. I don't know where it came from. Must have hit a button or something. So the other thing I wanted to cover in this video, so we covered eighth notes, and this, of course, right here, this little guy is what we call an eighth rest. He's an eighth rest, right? So an eighth rest. So there's another thing I probably should cover in this one, and that's what I call dotted notes. This is a dotted quarter note. And what basically a dotted quarter note is, and I'm going to go back to my desktop drawing pen, and I like to explain it kind of like history-wise of how it developed. If I draw a staff up here, out of the way, 5 lines. A long time ago, people didn't have nice printers and computers to do all their engraving for them. They actually had to do it all by hand. So sometimes we make a note last longer by using what we call a tie. It's this little line that goes like this. So I'm saying basically that this note is going to last for 1 beat plus half a beat. So if I was counting, then this would last for beat 1. Use a different color here. So it would last for beat 1 and the first half of beat 2, right? And then something else would happen here. I'd either have an eighth rest, or I would have another eighth note occurring there. So it'll be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and la, la. So you see I made it my note last for 1.5 beats. Let's see how it sounds in this little tune. So back it up. 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. So see this. So when we're, again, like in plucked instruments and stuff, is that the idea is that we're going to let it sustain for as long as it can until we get to the next note or next rest, right? But the other thing is we're not going to let a note last longer than it's supposed to. So if I play this 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and I would have to somehow keep that from ringing out for the last half of that beat, right? Let's hear it again. 2 and 3 and 4 and la 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 fa, la. Yeah, I didn't quite get that pitch there. That's okay, I'm not the best sight singer in the world. So that's a dotted quarter note. Now there's all sorts of dotted notes we can have. We can also have dotted half notes. So if I click on that, so now I have a dotted half note. So the idea of a dotted note is basically take the value of that note, its metronomic value that is, divide that in half and add that to the note, right? So let's go back here to our desktop drawer and get rid of that stuff. So we have a half note, right? It lasts for 2 beats. If I divide 2 in half, that's 1. So that's 2 plus 1. So it's like adding a quarter note. I'm going to go back to what I was talking about earlier. That's to say, because I didn't quite finish my thought. So we have a quarter note, say, and we tie that to an eighth note. So like I said before, is that, a long time ago, people didn't have manuscript. I mean, they didn't have printers and stuff. All they had was manuscript paper. And this is pretty expensive, right? And they had like a lot of people that they had to write for. Okay. So they started trying to write it real quick, and they just said, okay, this little guy is going to represent the same thing. And pretty soon it started looking like this. Just like, okay, I'm just going to like it. Then I said, oh, I'm just going to write it like this. You get what I mean? So it's kind of like a shorthand that developed over time until it looked like that. That's my quick and dirty explanation of how it came out to be. I could be wrong, but that's what I remember. Anyway, so we can have dotted half notes, right? And let's see how that sounds. So we're going to go back and I'm going to say 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1, 3, 4. So see, we try to make it last for all those 3 beats. Now you can have a dotted eighth note. And gee, why would we have a dotted eighth note? Well, because we also have what we call 16th notes. And if you guessed it, if it's a 16th note, then we can fit 16 of them in 4/4 time. We can fit 4 in one beat of 4/4 time. make something sound a little silly here. So this is there we go. So now we see we have a 16th rest. So it's got two, there's little curly cues on them. And we'll start here, see what this sounds like. It's gonna sound pretty weird, I'm sure. 2, 3, and 4, and so how do we count 16th notes? Well, we count 16th notes by doing by going 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and so on. That's what we call, and 4 E and So that's how we count, right? So we see here that this I have a as it were a 16th rest here, right? So we think about the value of an eighth note, right? An eighth note is equal to half a beat. So half a beat. So a little complicated for you guys who haven't covered that yet in school. If we divide that by 2, it's the same as multiplying it by a half, right? So that's 1/4, right? If that's a half, then a 16th note is a fourth. So a dotted eighth note rather is equal to, right, 1.5 plus a fourth. And we've got to make this into a 2 and this into a 4, so it's equal to the 3/4 of a beat. So think of it, just simply think of it as it lasts for 3 16th notes. So that's for 3 and the last fourth of that beat is not going to be there, right? So a dotted 16th note, we got to go back out here and ta-da. Hit that. So I'll get my 16th note. Ta-da! Dotted 8th note right there. That's going to last for 3/4 of the beat. 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a. Right. So that's how we count, right? That's how we count 16th notes. And that covers our dotted notes. So always think, okay, take the value, metronomic value, how long it lasts in time, divide it in half, and add it back to the note, and that's how long it's supposed to last. Little complicated? Well, it's the more you go over it, the more you practice it, the better you'll understand it, right? But this at least gives you a starting point for understanding. So dotted notes, right? We have 8th rests, 16th rests, we have quarter rests, we have let's just kind of list them out here. So I can have a whole rest, right? I can have half rests. Doesn't want to cooperate today. So that's a half rest. And we have quarter rests. Don't know why. Don't want to cooperate with me today. There you are. We have quarter rests. And we can have 8th rests. And we can even have 16th rests. Right. And we can have dotted rests, just like we have dotted notes. And all that sums up to make music incredibly, or at least music notation, as incredibly complex as live playing music. Almost anything, almost any rhythm can be represented by our music system. Notation or pitches is another thing though. For instance, in Indian music, they use notes that are kind of hard to notate, or if you get into what we call microtonal music, that's a little bit, other systems have been devised to help notate that kind of music. So, and I'll stop here. So, that's a good 30 minutes. I think that'll do it. So, I hope that this got you started in the right direction. And again, you can go back and review any part that you think you need to cover again. This software is free to download. Again, it's Musescore, available at musescore.com. And that's it for me. My name's Anthony Vasquez, and have yourself a good day. Bye.